Good morning, Royal We Fellowship. Shabbat Shalom. I know we are starting later today. I did have some internet issues earlier, but we are here, and you are welcome to follow along when you are able to get this message today. I wanted to make sure that we do have a message today that's posted. Today's message is going to be a powerful one. It's going to be a look at why and how really we need to leave toxic relationships. And it's going to be a different approach, a different look at the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, when we look at the ancient literature of the Bible, especially when we talk about a lot of these festivals and a lot of these things, Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it's very confusing as to what all of this stuff means. But if we apply what's going on to our understanding of toxic relationships, narcissistic abuse, and what we need to do to leave relationships, it's going to start to make more sense. Now then, turn with me to Exodus 12, because that's where we are going to be. And we are now at a place where God is using Moses to actually really prepare people's hearts for leaving the toxic relationship with Egypt, leaving the oppressive government that they are living under. Now, for the chapters prior to this, the story prior to this, Moses had been pressing into Pharaoh. All right. Why was Moses pressing into Pharaoh? God was having Moses press into Pharaoh. Why? So that God can harden Pharaoh's heart. Why did God need to harden Pharaoh's heart? This is an area we struggle with, but so that the Pharaoh would drive the people out. We talked about this many times before. Why is toxic relationships so painful? Why is narcissistic abuse so painful? When you are oppressed in a relationship that you should not be in, God, who loves you, who will chasten you, who desires you to get out of that relationship, knows that if he just opens a door and says, please come with me, y'all may not follow. Right? Especially if you feel like your needs are being met in that toxic relationship. This is the story of God's chosen people, of God's people in Egypt. This is the story of the mixed multitude. They were in Egypt living their lives. They had homes, they had relationships, they were marrying and being married, they had food, they were having children, but they were oppressed. They were under the authority and rulership of an evil empire. God wanted them out so they could be free to worship the Lord. Because if they were not out of that relationship, they were worshiping their oppressive government instead. God did not want that. He doesn't want that for you. He doesn't want that for me. So the only way to get them out was to send Moses and then to harden Pharaoh's heart so that Pharaoh would become so cruel to the people that he would drive them out. And the same is true with your story and with my story. Oftentimes we become comfortable in toxic relationships. We become complacent, so to speak. We lose ourselves and become okay with losing ourselves for far too long in these relationships. And the only way we can get out, the only way God can allow us to the only way God can get us out of these relationships is to not only allow, but cause the narcissistic people to become even more cruel. A lot of us walk away from these relationships shaking our head in shame and hurt, saying, how were they so mean? Why were they so hostile? Why were they so rude? Why were they so disrespectful? Why couldn't they just be nice? Again, if they were any nicer, the Lord knows you would have stayed. You would have stayed in an oppressive relationship where you would never be free to be who you are. So the cruelty was allowed in order to drive you out, much like God used the cruelty of the Pharaoh to drive the people out of Egypt. So yes, God hardened Pharaoh's heart to drive his people. He knew the only way to get his people out would be to harden Pharaoh's heart. Now, we are in Exodus 12. Open with me to Exodus 12, because what we are going to talk about and what we're going to look at is this particular type of festival. And not only is it a festival, but it's how God was preparing their hearts to leave. We call this the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. Again, this goes into a lot of the festivals of the ancient Hebrew people that we don't quite understand. Things like Passover, the festival of unleavened bread. We have a hard time making sense as to what all these things represent. Chapter 12 of Exodus says this: the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, this month is to be for you the first month of your year. Right? It's kind of like we're starting things over. This is the first month of your year, and we are going to get you out. This is going to be the beginning of a new life for you. When you leave a toxic relationship, when you leave narcissistic abuse, it is a new year. It's a brand new life. You're getting ready to start over. This is a big deal. Listen, what the Lord is telling Moses here is you need to honor this with these people. They're leaving everything behind. They are starting life over. A lot of you are going to understand this. When you leave toxic relationships, toxic family members, a marriage even, you're starting over. You are getting ready to go into a brand new life. Not an easy thing to do. So the Lord says to Moses, this month is to be for you the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor. Having taken into account the number of people there are, you are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they will take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. That same night, they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. A lot of people don't understand this. When we talk about in the ancient literature about slaughtering lambs, slaughtering goats, it was for the purpose of eating. This is really, it wasn't just slaughter them and lay them out in the field. That is not the type of God that we honor. It basically was a barbecue. Now, keep in mind, back in the ancient days, and I know a lot of people when they hear these words like slaughter and all this stuff, and listen, when you go to Chick-fil-A and buy chicken, guess where it came from? A group of people who actually slaughtered the chickens for you on your behalf, right? So we tend to hear these words like slaughter the cow, slaughter the animal, especially in the ancient days, and we typically get put off by that. Why would they slaughter animals? It's cruelty. Well, listen, if you're eating hamburgers, somebody slaughtered it for you. So basically, what they're talking about here, what God is saying is you're to have a barbecue, all right? And you got to get the lambs, and people eat lamb. How many of you have ever had Greek gyros, right? Lamb is actually quite good. I've had gyro meat. It's tasty, okay? So this is what God is saying. This is what the Lord is telling the people. You're going to have a barbecue, but it's going to have a different meaning because you're going to take some of the blood from this barbecue. And there's this particular way that they're going to have this barbecue. And this is what we need to pay attention to. This is what this message is for, and this is for you, all right? So here the Lord is telling these people, have this barbecue. This is what you're going to do. You're going to roast the meat over the fire along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. This is important. Do not eat the meat raw or boiled in water, but roast it over a fire. Watch this. Roast it with the head, legs, internal organs. Basically, put the whole thing up there and roast it. All right? Do not leave anything until morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. Okay? This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked in your belt. It's basically saying you're going to look nice. Tuck yourself in. Tuck your shirt in, right? Your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. Now, this is where we're going to get into something that you need to understand here. What is this? Eat it in haste. Eat it with your cloak tucked in your belt, staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. Put the whole thing on the fire. Do not put leaven in the bread. I want you to catch a theme here as to what's going on. It has everything to do with the word haste. Now, I want you to keep this word in your mind right now. The word haste. What haste means to you and what's really going on. God is delivering people out of a toxic environment, out of the oppression of a toxic government, out of a toxic relationship. And we're getting to this place now where the Lord is saying, it's time for haste, right? We're beyond time for haste. This is post-haste time, okay? On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals. I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. This is a day you are to commemorate for the generations to come. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. For 7 days you are to eat bread made without yeast. There's that word again, without yeast, and we're going to talk about this. On the first day, remove the yeast from your houses, for whoever eats anything with yeast in it from the first day through the seventh must be cut off from Israel. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly, and another one on the seventh day. Do not work on these days except to prepare food for everyone to eat. That is all you may do. Now, celebrate the festival of unleavened bread, because it was on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for generations to come. In the first month, you are to eat bread made without yeast, from the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. For 7 days, no yeast is to be found in your houses, and anyone, whether foreign or native born, who eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off from the community of Israel. Eat nothing made with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. Now, let's talk about this unleavened bread. All right? Why? Why is it so important that God says eat unleavened bread? Why is it so important? Again, God has a purpose and a plan for driving his people out of toxicity, out of toxic relationships. What does leavened bread represent? What does, and again, he was very particular. Also, the Lord's instructions were particular on how to cook the animal. Put the whole animal up on a fire and roast it. Head, legs, internal organs, roast the dang thing, right? The only other thing to do is to take some of the blood and get ready to put that over your houses, where the Spirit of the Lord is going to move throughout this place. And anywhere where the blood is over, the Passover blood is over the areas where the Lord instructed them, put them, the Spirit of the Lord is going to move over that, going to pass over that. But everything is being done in haste. This is the purpose. It's haste. It comes down to haste. What does putting leaven in bread represent? It represents taking times. It represents making something perfect. It represents waiting for the right time according to you and according to me to do something, right? How many of you have ever made bread? Oh, you can't eat the bread yet. It's not ready because the leaven hasn't caused the bread to rise yet. How many of you in toxic relationships, I'm going to shift gears with you here. How many in toxic relationships are waiting or had wasted time waiting for the perfect moment to leave the toxic relationships? You were waiting until you had everything in order. You were waiting until you had a certain amount of money. You were waiting until you had something lined up. You were waiting until you had a resolution to the problems. You were waiting until it seemed like there was a mutual understanding with toxic people as to why the relationship needed to end. How many of you have been there? I know I have. Here's what the Lord is saying by saying, do not use leaven in the bread. He's saying, don't wait till the bread rises. Don't wait until you think the time is perfect to eat. Keep the leaven out of it. The main ingredient of bread is leaven. That's what causes it to become fluffy. Other than that, you got a doughy, a shriveled up thing. But the Lord is saying that's what you're going to eat. You're going to not wait for the time to look right. You're going to not wait for it to look like it's perfect. You're going to not wait according to what you think needs to happen. You're going to make this without something that's going to cause it to make it look desirable. And instead, you're just going to eat it and you're going to leave. Has everything to do with haste. The same thing with the animal. You're going to slaughter the animal, the head, the tail, the legs, all. You're going to put it up there. You're going to roast it. And the aroma is going to fill the air, and it's going to reach God as you're roasting. You're sacrificing the animal, and you're going to eat that meat. You're not going to take the time to cut this off and cut that off and de-gut it and fillet it and season it with the salt and butter baste it and turn it. You're not going to do all of that. Why? Because that represents what we often do in toxic relationships. It represents, wait a minute, I'm not ready to go. I got to get this in order. I got to get that in order. I really need to make sure this financial thing is in place. And I got to make sure that this person understands. And I got to make sure that we have a, mutual understanding. And I really want the toxic person to give me permission. It's okay to leave. The Lord is saying, no, get that yeast, all that you can consider all of that yeast. You are waiting, and I was waiting in toxic relationships for the yeast to rise, to make it look perfect, to make our circumstances for leaving look perfect. The Lord is saying, it's not going to look perfect. It's not going to be pretty. You may not even want to eat it, but this is what you need to do in honor of I am the Lord, and you leave when things are bad and it doesn't look good and you don't know if it's going to be tasty. You don't know how things are going to pan out. This is not time to wait for things to look perfect. You go. This is the purpose of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's not waiting for things to line up right. It's not waiting for things to look appetizing. This is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's being hasty. It's saying it's time to go. And so I hope that this inspires some of you, or perhaps causes you to look back at the hastiness in which you needed to detach and separate yourself. Now you can understand why things didn't look perfect, why things didn't look the way you wanted it to. Again, leavened bread that's risen, that's what people want to see before they eat. But the Lord is saying, it's not going to look the way you want it to look. That's not what's going to happen. Excuse me. Listen, I hope that this encourages you and inspires you. Inspires you and opens more doors to understanding how the Lord wants to operate in removing toxic people from your life. Those of you who may be stuck, waiting for things to look perfect in your life, take the story into account of the unleavened bread, of the sacrifice of the lamb, of what's being done here, of what's being said here. The Lord is getting his people to understand it's time to go. It's not time to make things look right according to you. It's time to leave. We're going to continue on in Exodus 12 because there's a lot more as they prepare to leave the toxic relationship that they have with Egypt. The Lord is preparing the hearts of of the people, what it looks like to walk away, to start a brand new life. And so we're going to get more into Exodus chapter 12 next Shabbat. I want to thank all of you for being here with me today. Blessings to you all. Shabbat shalom. Have a great weekend. And we'll be back next Saturday right here on Royal We Fellowship. Have a great weekend, everybody.